I've been asked to give a bit of an intro to xLights, something that I'm always uncomfortable with because I kind of don't approach it like a new user anymore, and so it's kind of hard to fully appreciate the complexity of it when you first approach it and all the screens, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out of this configuration here and I'm going to change to a new folder. So I'm going to make a new folder on the desktop and we'll make that our show folder. Because xLights works on the concept you have a show folder and your entire configuration is in there. And so if you want to use someone else's configuration, you just need their show folder. xLights doesn't care. So I run lots of show folders. Every time someone has a problem, they send it to me. It becomes another show folder. I load it up and I get their configuration. So when you first load up xLights, you'll get this. It'll be empty. There's nothing here. There's 3 tabs. The setup tab is all about your controllers. So things like the IP addresses of your controllers, the universes and start channels. If you're using LOR or Renard, you'll have a USB stick and you'll put your configuration into here. The beauty with xLights is you don't have to have any of those things to start playing with it. Okay, so you can leave this tab entirely empty, and in fact, if you never want to control your lights from xLights, technically you don't even have to put anything here at all. And xLights will just deal with that, let you sequence songs, let you create the FSCQ files that you would eventually upload to your Falcon Pi player if that's how you're driving your show. However, if you do want to run or test your elements out of xLights, you will eventually have to put a configuration in here. And if you plan on using the xLights new scheduler to run your show, you do need to set up your configuration here. But it's not the first thing you have to do. You can leave that to later. The layout is where you lay out all the props on your house, and this is really where you should start. Okay, you would typically start by clicking on this background image icon here, click on the ellipsis, and you would find a bitmap which would be a representation of your house. You need to take a photo from the best viewing angle that you want people to watch. You know, put a little X on the road or something, because that's where you want to take photographs of your house from as well. Because when you lay your house out, everything's going to be best viewed from that point. Okay? I think it's best to use a photo of your house at Christmas time with all your lights up. Because when you come to lay all your models out, you'll know where your mega tree is because you've got a picture of your mega tree, right? You'll know exactly where all your props go because they're in your picture. So you choose your picture and you place it there. And then you'd come down to this brightness, and if your picture is of your house in daytime, you'll want to dim your house down so that it doesn't dominate and you can't see it. And so by reducing this number down, you can make your photo a lot darker so that the photo doesn't dominate your display when you're trying to do things. Once you've done that, it's really a matter of building all of your elements. Okay? xLights up the top here, these black icons are a list of all the elements that xLights has inbuilt capabilities for. Now, each of these models are quite opinionated, right? So they support a limited number of configurations. So if you wire up your models using one of the configurations we support, it's incredibly easy to set a model up. If you try and do something bizarre, like Alec wires his matrix from the middle out, okay, you're in a world of hurt. You can still do it in xLights, but you'll have to create custom models. xLights won't do it the easy way for you. But if you stick with the way in which xLights assumes you model things, then life gets extremely simple. And we'll show some of that. The props we support, there's arches here. That's either one arch or several arches if they're close together. If you've got arches but they're separated, you'd actually draw them as individual arches. There's candy canes, and the candy cane model will also do sort of sticks. So if you've got just sticks of pixels, you can do that with the candy cane models. The circles models is just concentric circles of pixels. The custom allows you to pretty much create anything. It's a bit of work. But with a lot of the props like the Boscoyo props, etc., those models have already been created from someone, and you just need to go and find one of them because you can actually load them. We have these files called xModel files, which is the full description of the model, and you can just import them in. And I'll show you that in a minute with the snowflake there, how we can set that up. DMX. The DMX model is good for moving heads, Skulltronics type skulls, for Halloween and the like. But you can also use it to drive any DMX type device like a smoke machine or a bubble machine or anything else. Those models are good for those sorts of things. You have icicles, including a variety of different drop patterns. So if you've got icicles which are, 354, 354 or something, you can lay all that out in the icicles model. The matrix is good for your P10 panels or your chroma mesh type panels, that sort of thing. Your single lines, that's great for outlining your house if you want, if you just got a straight line or along the edge of a garden or something. But it's also really useful for things like floodlights and the like, because you just create a straight line model with one node in it, it becomes a floodlight. Okay. The polyline's like the straight line model, but it lets you turn corners, and so you can do things like outline your house. If you run the lights across your house and up the roof and around, you can use the polyline and just draw it all as one model. The spinner is good for spinners. Stars, including multi-lay stars, the star model. The trees is good for trees like these ones here, but it's also good for spiral trees as well, so it can represent those. The window frames and door frames are done with the window frame model. The wreath is good for those wreaths again. And then there's import custom, which is how you would bring in something like a snowflake. Now the secret to using these is knowing how you've wired it or how you intend to wire it. But the beauty of most of how xLights works is at the end of the day, if you know you're going to have a tree, but you're not entirely sure how big it's going to be because you haven't ordered your pixels yet. You're not entirely sure how many strands it's going to be because you haven't ordered your pixels yet. You can still model your tree, guess it. You can always come back later and change it, right? And the effects in xLights will still work. You might need to tweak them a little bit because it's not 32 strands, it's now 16, and so you want to make things a little bit different in proportions, but the effects will all still work. And you can see that because a lot of people go out and they buy sequences from other people and they import them in, and they're bringing them in from, that effect was on a snowflake and I'm bringing it in, I'm putting it on a star, and you'll still get an effect. It may not look exactly the same, but it will still work. So let's throw some common things in. So a tree, you just click on the button at the top, you click and drag and it paints you your tree. You can move it around. It has a bunch of properties which are sitting over here on the left. Trees obviously come in a number of different shapes and sizes. They can be a round tree, and that doesn't have to be 360 round. It could be a 180 or a 270. It can be a flat tree, so just flat strips up against a wall or just hanging down flat. We'll leave it on round. So the degrees here lets you describe how far around the tree you go. So in my place, for instance, people, they can see sort of from either side, but they can't really see the back of the tree. So I just go around 270 degrees and I leave the back blank. If you're going to do spiral racks, so if you were doing a spiral rack type tree, what you would do is you typically have one string of lights and you might spiral it around 3 times. And so you get a nice spiral. Or maybe you don't, maybe you have 2 strings and they're interlaced, right? So it's really easy to create those sort of models. Go back. A string, conceptually a string is a physical length of lights. It's not the size of the string that comes in the packet from China, right? You may join multiple together. That's still one string, okay? And so when you look at a tree like this big tree here is only 2 strings, okay? It goes up and down a lot, right, but it's only 2 strings. And so if I was modelling this tree, I would actually change the number of strings to be 2. The number of nodes, so each string is actually 400 pixels long. So we'd be putting 400 in here. And then what there is there's actually 8 strands. And a strand is 1 up or 1 down. So it goes up and down 8 times. And so you would show the strands per string as 8. And you can see the model physically didn't look a lot different than when I had 16. But it's now told it it's wired differently. And that's kind of important. You also get to decide whereabouts the wiring starts. Generally on a tree you would start at either bottom left. So bottom left means it's starting over here at the bottom of the tree on the left. But you can also start at the top. So my tree's at sometimes start at the top because I hang the tree and all my data goes in at the top of the tree. So mine's a top left tree, but you can move it around depending on where you want it to be. So that's a tree. I'll quickly show you just a couple others. We won't go overboard here. So the star that we have over there on top of the tree, that's a single layer star. It happens to be 20 pixels. Generally stars are wired with one string. You do have this layer sizes option where I can come in and say that it's multiple layers. So I've said that that's 50 pixels wired as 30 on the outside, 10 in the middle, 10 in the middle, and then 10 in the center. So you can create multi-layer stars. Again, you've got to be very careful about where the start point is. You need to start sort of typically in the middle at the bottom or at the top. If you start at one of the bottom legs on the left or right hand side, the internal model's not wired that way, and so you'll have to build a custom model for it because there's no easy way to just model it in xLights. This one here, however, is a single layer star of 20 pixels, and hopefully that looks something like that star there. Custom models. So obviously the best way is to import a custom model, and I have a custom model here of that snowflake that someone else has generated, which is obviously the easiest way to get a custom model, beats hell out of creating it yourself. However, you will occasionally be driven to the point where you do need to create a custom model. Creating a custom model is, again, you click on it, draw it, okay, and at this point you need to go and you need to change the model data. Now there's a couple of ways to make doing this easy. If you've got a relatively static item or an item where you can clearly see the pixels, you know what the pixels are, take a picture of it, and if you click on this background image here and put the image in there, then when you go into the custom model data screen here, behind this grid would actually be the image of your element. So you would be able to see where the pixels actually are on the element, which makes it a lot easier to number it. Obviously, your elements are probably bigger than 5 by 5, and so you can come into here and make that grid as big as you need it to be, and you can zoom it in and out so you can actually see the whole grid. And with your image behind it, it's relatively easy to put it in. Now, if this is just a dumb string type model, okay, then what you would do is you would start at 1 and you just put lots and lots of 1s representing the pixels that are all on that first channel. Okay, and you draw reindeers or draw whatever you want to draw. If it's pixels, then they actually need to have unique numbers. So you'd start at 1 and you'd always go up. Now you always start at 1 when you're in this screen doing a custom model. You don't start with the actual channel number that the model's on. You always start at 1. And when you're doing that, you would go into this auto numbering mode. And that way, every time you click on one of these squares, it's going to insert a number and it's going to increase it. And so you just click your way around the model, clicking on each pixel, assuming you know which pixel is which to create the custom model. And that's kind of hard to see, I realise. If you zoom in there, you can see that it's inserted numbers representing each pixel. Okay? If you don't know which pixel is what, that gets hard even with an image. Your next option is the video mapping. And under the video mapping, what you do is you go, I'll get out of this, click OK. Oh, okay, it's a bit funny looking model. But under the tools, there is a generate custom model. And this is a two-step process. On the prepare step, you would have the element plugged in, you'd have all of your controller configuration because we're actually going to need to control the element. You'd say the number of nodes and what start channel it's on, and then you'd click on this run capture pattern and you'd set a video camera up. So in Vegas I set up my iPhone and I took a video of the model, and what the pattern will do is it will go through and it will light up each pixel. And at the end you stop your video camera, you take the video, load it onto your computer, and you go into the process panel. And on the process panel, you basically point at that video and it will watch the video and it will find each pixel and tag them for you automatically. Now, this works really well if the pixels are really distinct. If the pixels are sort of hidden behind and all of that sort of stuff, it may not work perfectly. But there is also a manual mode that you can use. And what that will do is it will show you the video and it will stop as each pixel lights up and you just have to click on the pixel. And it will keep track of those and number them for you. And at the end, it'll generate you a custom model file that you can import and put onto your display. So we strung a set of pixels up over the front of a surface, we video mapped it, and we generated a custom model. And then when we did a wipe or a bars effect from left to right, it exactly mapped where every pixel was, and it looks perfect. So with your reindeer, you can use a video mapper, and if you want to do a fill from left to right on your reindeer, it'll work. Takes a little bit of patience. Like I say, you really need pretty ideal conditions for it to do it all for you automatically. But it's pretty cool when it works. And you can edit it, so if it makes a couple errors, and it always does make a couple errors, you can just go into the edit details and you can just change a few things. It'll tell you where it couldn't find a pixel or where it found 2 pixels, which will happen if it reflects off a surface or something. So that's setting up all of our elements. Look, I'm not going to go back and set the setup up. I will highlight that even if you don't have a matrix, create a matrix in your layout. Okay? Put it somewhere, because the way xLights is going to work behind the scenes, it sees every element as a matrix. Right? Sometimes it's a nice big matrix like this. Sometimes it's a matrix which is 1 pixel high and very long, like a single strand. But every effect gets generated like it's on a matrix. And so having a matrix, even in a separate show directory, etc., where you can drop effect on it and see what the effect looks like, you get a better appreciation for what the effect's actually doing. Now, when you drop it onto a tree, it'll probably look similar to the matrix. When you drop it onto a single line or a star, it's going to look somewhat different, but at least you get a feeling for what the effect's doing under the covers. Because it sees everything as a matrix. So let's go and quickly create a new sequence. This is an animation, so there's no audio waveform. If this was a song, we'd have the audio waveform up here. If there was an audio file, you can also do things like use the Queen Mary Vamp plugins to automatically generate things like beats and bars and the like, which can make it easy to sequence, because often you're obviously looking to sequence your colour changes and everything else to go with things like beats and bars in the song, etc. So there are a bunch of tools there which will help you do that. At the end of the day, once people get familiar with it, I think most people do set their timing marks manually. And that's really as simple as finding the place where you want it and pressing a lowercase t, and that inserts a timing mark. So you can put as many of these as you like. xLights works though with an interval. So the way in which your controllers will work is they will pump the data out to your elements at a fixed interval. Right? Most people run their shows at 50 milliseconds or 20 frames a second. Okay? Some people run it at 40. They've either got OCD or maybe they're doing singing faces and they really are frustrated when the mouths just don't quite look right. And at 40 frames a second, it'll look a bit better. But the vast majority of people would use 20 frames a second. So when xLights is, so as I zoom in here, and I'm just double clicking my way in, you can also zoom and scroll, you'll notice that these things here are quite discrete. So if I go and drop an effect on here, now let me turn timing marks off so it doesn't. All right. So when I drag it, you'll notice that as I drag it, it jumps. It doesn't move smoothly, and that's because xLights, as it sequences, only really lets you drop on the frames. It doesn't let you go beyond the frame level because it's not efficient or effective to do so. If you were 40 frames a second, you would obviously have smaller jumps in how far it jumps. xLights will let you go down to, I want to say 50 or 60 frames a second. I think it's about as high as it goes, but most controllers will struggle with that. but xLights will cope with it. So, I mean, this is probably the first effect that most people ever drop on something, because it does look pretty cool on pretty much any element you care to name. It's the butterfly effect. So xLights, it's all about dropping effects onto models. The reason it's jumping backwards and forwards is because we've got this on an incredibly short interval. Effects themselves have a whole bunch of properties which allow you to customize what they look like. Let's grab something like bars. Okay, so you can change the number of bars. You can change the cycles, which controls how fast those bars move around. You can control which way they go. Oh, that's because I set cycles to 0. So there's a whole bunch of different attributes that allow you to control how an element goes. There's also, having exhausted all the options over here, you obviously also have the ability to set colours. You can even, by right-clicking on this, choose colours which aren't actually single colours but are combinations of colours. This one happens to be changing over time, but you can also have rainbow colours and all sorts of things. You can also do things like transition effects in and out, so you can do transitions between effects, fades, and so forth. And you can also spin things around if you really want to, right? So there is literally oodles of options here that you get to play with. You could spend the rest of your life fiddling with these things, trying to get them exactly right. So I wouldn't necessarily start with something like a roto-zoom, but it's always there. The other thing you can do is you can add multiple layers. Okay, and by adding multiple layers, you get the ability to do things like blend effects together. So we'll put some fire in there, and in the background, I don't know, we'll throw it. Oops, that was not good. I dropped it on top. Okay, so you can see how it blends things together. All right, and you can control how they blend together. So, so up here, right, with this tooltip that appears for way too little time, there's a whole bunch of ways that you can blend that together. So you can change the way they come together. The way xLights works is it renders the models from top to bottom, and that becomes relevant when you start to group models together, because you're going to blend, and therefore you can be rendering on the model but on a group that contains the model, and so you need to worry about which order it renders in. Layers are like paint. They render from bottom to top, and that can be a little confusing, remembering which one you're looking at a time. With some people, with things like chasers and the like, some people can have anything to 15 or 20 layers on a single model. So it can get very out of hand. So the other thing you can do is you can, where is it? Oh, true. You can also double click and expand, and you can actually go down to the strands. Right, so these are the individual strings of lights, and you can actually sequence them that. And if you're coming from LOR and you desperately love to actually sequence at the individual node level, you can also go down just by double clicking down to that level as well, and you can sequence an individual pixel if that's really what you want to do. Most people would not bother. I occasionally see people do sequencing at the strand level. If you've seen Logan's Star Wars, when he has the lightsabers coming together at the beginning, he does that by sequencing it at the strand level rather than at the model level. But the vast majority of stuff people do at the model level. They might put lots of layers and things like that, but that's where they would do things. The other thing that you can do with your models is you can actually create submodels out of them. So take something like this snowflake here, and I'm going to hope that someone's already created these for me, otherwise no one has. All right, so what we can do here is we can create submodels out of this. So let's imagine I wanted a submodel that made this thing look like a spinner, because you can see that in the body of the snowflake here, there is actually a spinner buried inside there. So one of the things that you can do here is you can come in here and look at this pixel. So that's pixel number 3, 45. So, bloody hell, what's it done? 1 to... Well, no, you do this, you go out every second and then you come every second, and that way you don't have to keep cutting the strings of pixels, right? So it's quite a common way to sequence a snowflake. So it looks like it's 1 to 3, and it's 45 to 46. So we're going to say 1 to 3 and 45 and 46. And you can see it highlights it nicely, so you can see which one it actually is. Because I want to have these arms as separate layers, what this is doing is it's creating kind of a virtual model behind the scenes. And so I'm going to make each arm on a separate row. So I'm going to come over to this one here, and that's 11 through 9 to 11, 6 and 5. So this is 5 to 6, 5, sorry. So 5 to 6 and 9 to 11, right? Yep, got it right. We'll quickly do the rest here if we can. 19, so 17 to 19, 14 and 13. So 13, 14, and what did I say, 17 to 19? Ah, yes. 27, so 25 to 27 and 21 and 22. 21, 22, 25 to 27. 35 to 33. 29, 30. 29, 30, 33. 35. And finally we have 43, 41 to 43, and 37 and 8. 37, 38, and was it 43 to 45? Was that right? No. 43, 41 to 43. Okay. Yeah. All right. So that looks good.
I noticed you've done them all numerically. Does it matter what order they're in?
It does. You know what? This is going to be a problem. I should have actually done them, and you'll see why in a minute. It actually is kind of important. I should go 3, 45, 2, 46. Is it 3? 3, 45, 2, 46, and 1. I should actually do it like that, because when I place effects on this, you'll find that this arm is going to go nicely inside to outside. The other ones aren't, because I was a bit lazy in how I set them up. So let's go to our sequencer. We still have our flake here. When we double click on our flake, you can see that the arm submodel is actually shown here. If we, and I'm going to use the bars effect because that kind of works well. So you can see that that submodel is looking like a spinner. And it's kind of spinning. And it works kind of nice like that, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter in the spinner which order I did these pixels in. But if I was to change the bars effect to make it a right effect, I'll reduce the number of colours. Make this a little bit simpler. Just make it red and green. Okay. You can see the top one's working really nicely. It starts green and it slides up. These ones not so much so. All right, and the reason the others aren't going so well is because I wasn't really careful about making sure I put the pixels in the right order, and so it's created a bit of a random ordered string, and so the bars effect isn't doing exactly what you'd want it to do. However, so now I've gone to per preview, and per preview actually looks at the relative position of each pixel, and so you can see that it's actually doing a bars going across the spinner. The transformation, sorry, the render style up here, if I turn that into single line, you get an even different effect again.
Can I
How did you get that one again, Keith? Sorry.
So I changed the render style to per preview. And now it treats the model like the model's there, and it just wipes across the bar, across the whole thing, and it recognises where in space the pixel is rather than how it's wired.
And that just changes it to that submodel?
Yes, just for that effect. So just for that effect, not even for that submodel. So if I had another layer and put another effect in that same time period on that particular submodel, it would change again. All of these panels up here, these three here, and the effect settings down here are all actually attributes of the effect, not of the model. So you can treat the model as a single line with one effect and then have another effect on another layer and treat it as an entirely different thing.
So if you wanted them to be...
Well, yeah, you can copy and paste it, or yeah. So if we go back to our layout, we'll go and create a second snowflake. Now, when I copy the snowflake, it's included the submodels. Also, if I export this snowflake, it will include the submodel. So the next person that imports this XModel file will get all of the submodels that I've created as well. So ideally, you find someone. So even when there are multiple submodels out there, custom models out there that you can download, have a look inside it, because someone may have invested the time in a really good submodel. The other thing with custom models is be very aware of how they've been wired. All right, so this is the way it's done, but click on the wiring view. Okay, and it gives you a nice image showing you how all the pixels have been connected together. Okay, and this is looking from the back, which conveniently is the direction from which you push your pixels. But be aware of that. If you want to print it, you can come down here, make it light so that it'll print nice on black and white, and then export it to an image file, and then you can print it using your favourite image printing program. Okay, you get a nice little warning up here, caution, this is the reverse view. Pay attention. If you get it wrong though, I think Gil added a nice flip. Yeah, so if you get it wrong, just flip it. And now the model's the other way around and you're all good again. That happened because I think a few too many people screwed it up.
Just a quick one on the submodels. Could you use that, for example, like the bulb? Yeah, if you're doing a face and a bulb.
Oh, absolutely. So with the bulb, I always do the top part of the bulb as a submodel and the bottom screw part as a submodel as well.
A single line at one point.
Yeah, you used to have to create. Yeah, so before we had submodels, people would create these shadow models, which was, a model which was mapped to the same channel, and then they drop effects on it to get it. With submodels, that's not as necessary anymore. So you can also come up here and right-click and add a group. So if I've got multiple snowflakes now, I can create a snowflakes group. And down here, I need to add my two snowflakes in. You can actually also add submodels in. So I could go up here and say, add group, and I could call this my snowflake spinners. Right, and then I could come down to my two arms groups here and save that. And then when I come back to the sequencer, obviously I need to add all of those things into my show, which is good. And somewhere down here, well, it would help if I didn't have my tree expanded. So here's my snowflakes. If I drop a butterfly on my snowflakes, you can see it lights both of my snowflakes up. Across the top here you have all of your effects. There are an absolutely massive array of effects. Some of them are really quite specific and really only usable for very, very limited scenarios. This one here, the servo, right, that's great for controlling 16-bit DMX models. I'm willing to bet probably no one in this room has any 16-bit DMX models. All right, one person in the room has a 16-bit DMX model. Things like the state effect have very limited uses, but the uses that they have they're really useful for.
Obviously, you've got all those groups of models there. I've seen how some people obviously drop on the whole house or your whole display.
So if I want to drop it on my whole display, I'd go and create a group called whole display, and I'd put everything inside it. Models can appear in as many groups as you like, and groups can appear inside groups as well. So I can go back to layout. I'm going to add. So I'm going to grab everything. I'm going to grab everything but the submodels. Right, we'll add them all in. Save it. Go back to the sequencer. We bring up the display elements. Right, so there's all the elements in the bottom right there that are currently in my display. This is the one that isn't. I can drag it over if I want. I can put them in any order. If you right click here, there's a sort. I would generally use that as my sort order. But sometimes you want to put them in different orders. And I can now come up to the top here and the all's there, and I can drop anything on it I want. Once you get lots of models, you can create views which allow you to create views which restrict the number of models. So you might have a view which is your singing faces, and that way you only see your singing faces models while you're sequencing them. And then you'll switch to another view which might be your mini trees, and you'll do your mini trees or your lawn or your house or the roof or whatever, right? Just because otherwise you spend a lot of time scrolling up and down through all of the models. Even on a big screen, I've got 100-odd models in my display, and it's a big list. So if you come up here and you add a view, and I'm going to call this my snowflakes view. Right. And so it starts off with nothing in it. You're probably going to want to add your timing in. My snowflake spinners, I think I want those. And the actual flakes themselves, maybe I want those as well. Okay. So now we're in the snowflakes view, and all we see are the snowflakes. And with this drop down here, I can switch back to my master view. Remember, the master view is the thing that controls the rendering. So I can have them in my snowflake view in any order, but how I talked about, it renders from top to bottom, layers from bottom to top, that always looks to the master view to work out what order they're in. They don't have to be in the same order in these other views.